So we're going to talk about life and death and the Buddhist view of it and why it's important. How we come into this life and how we go out of it, and what's the point basically, what's the action points about this. So that we can be ready for death and the next life so we can help others. So why? In the long term, so that we can develop our marvellous potential, our natural potential for perfection. So then we're really qualified to help others, just naturally. So I think this is why we're here. Sangye charang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola pekche sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola pekche sangye drupa shok Sangye charang soke chognam la Janchu badu dagni kyab suchi Dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki Drola penche sangye drupa shok. So I was really happy to be able to put this book of Lamas of Rinpoche's together. You know, it started in 2003 when Rinpoche was teaching in France on another topic altogether, and one of his older students came to him and said her old daddy had just died suddenly, and I didn't know what to do, she said. So I think Rinpoche was probably shocked. Doesn't say it like that, because, you know, she was one of the older students, like all of us, and we know about these things. I mean, if we're halfway Buddhist even, you kind of know that death is part of the deal. You know, Buddha's not afraid to talk about death. There's very detailed descriptions of death, you know, blah, blah, blah. We know about this. But somehow we don't really know about it because we don't want to know about it. So we say the words. But to really engage in it, like education, that's different, you know. And then that's why she didn't know what to do. She had a panic attack, basically, and didn't know what to do, you know. So basically, Rinpoche then changed tack and proceeded to teach about how to help at the time of death. So Rinpoche has given these teachings many, many times the last 40 years in different ways, you know, variations of it. And actually, if you put them all together, it's probably only 20 pages, and it's all just... So Rinpoche, so then the biggest job for me as an editor, you know, if anyone does editing, it's like, it's Lama's teachings. But he doesn't kind of, when he teaches, he doesn't give headings and structure and chapters and parts and sort of, you know, structure. He just talks, you know, spontaneously from the heart, all about the things we need to do. And basically it's overwhelming instruction because Rinpoche's got more practices. I mean, he finds practices and mantras in secret places that no one else has ever heard of. He's famous for this, you know. So in the end, it seemed to me the only way, and it took time, the only way to do the book was to do it chronologically. And then secondly, when he gives the teaching just to everybody who's in front of him, but the only way to frame the book was to how to help your loved ones. In other words, it's all addressed to you. But when you're saying what to do at the time you stop breathing, it's a bit hard for you to do it when you stop breathing. So then the book had to be addressed to somebody, so it makes sense to be addressed to us as a helper, you know. And then of course it's for ourselves as well. And so it's about how to help your loved ones, you know. I mean, help your enemies as well, if you're brave enough. Help them to die nicely, not force their death. I'm joking. So the thing is, so that's the framing of the book, the framework. And so then the only other one had to think, well, you know, you can put all the teachings in 10, 20, 30 pages, but what good is that? So then the only way to do it, seemed to me, was to do it chronologically. What to do when, basically. So it's a handbook. It's a handbook. So the wisdom version's out there, and I know I keep saying this every time I say it, and I hope wisdom doesn't find out, but, you know, also you can get it for free. If you just look on your book, look on your little book. You can also download the PDF if you want it on your e-reader, you know. And it's a different version. It's a different structure. The one I first did, and then when they published it, they kind of did a different way of doing it. It's okay. All the information is there. So as you can see on page 4, a version of it publishes how to help your loved ones enjoy death and go happily to the next rebirth can be downloaded free from fpmt.org. So that's in case you want one on your e-reader as well as have the hardback. And they're different. You'll see they're different, you know. In like, for example, Rinpoche uses sometimes Tibetan words, sometimes Tibetan names, sometimes Sanskrit names for the different deities, whereas they always use the Sanskrit in wisdom because that's kind of the more scholarly thing to do. So there's going to be differences, but essentially it's all the same teachings, you know. You'll see. So the chronologically is the point. The chronology is the point. So okay, the obvious question is, why would we want to help somebody at the time of death? What's the point? Well, there's a big difference. I mean, it's really typical in the West these days, isn't it? Many people now choosing to work in hospice or to work as nurses and doctors in that whole area. You know, selecting it. I remember doing a conference a few years ago in Melbourne, I think, or Bendigo or somewhere, in Victoria, and people, these young people choosing to be doctors and nurses in this area. I'm so moved by it, you know, it's wonderful. There's so much more talk about it. I was in a conference in Sydney in a hospital, a children's hospital, and this wonderful doctor trying to get past all the fears and the dramas and helping people confront death and deal with death, and he dealt with the death and the sickness and death of children. So the morgue he had at the hospital, he decorated it like a nursery. And all the sisters and brothers would walk in and out of the not sort of hidden, dark, scary place called a morgue. And he had it decorated like a nursery, and all the kids would walk in and out, and they'd say, "Come and meet my dead brother," you know, bringing death right into the front, which is fantastic. But still, the Buddhist point, and indeed you could say the Christian one too, anybody who posits something after you die, which is not the job of the materialist world, you know, that they call that individual and they call that religious. But clearly the Buddhist one, certainly, there's a fundamental different point. So for us in the West, and the materialist view is it's fantastic, prepare for death, stop being afraid of death, talk about it with your kids, confront the fact you're going to die, and then you're going to indeed help your loved ones, and around the time of death, when your mummy dies, your daddy dies, everyone's made peace, which is fantastic. But once your mummy's dead, as far as the West is concerned, then it's all about us, isn't it? I mean, somebody who saw this manuscript said, "Where's all the stuff about grieving?" Well, that's about us. This is about the dead person. This is their gig, okay? And everything in this book is about how to help the person who's dying and dead. And then half of the practices for Rinpoche are after they're dead. Now that doesn't occur in the West, of course. So the crucial point then, to get to the real point, which really struck me properly when I did this book, edited Rinpoche's book, was we're not actually preparing for death. We're not actually preparing for death. We're preparing for the next life. When we get that clear, everything falls into place. But of course for our materialist world, this takes time. I couldn't have said that so simply when I first became a Buddhist. It just sort of seems like superstition. We're so caught up in the bubble of me, now, this world. It's a very deep addiction in all of us. And it's not because of our programming by our parents. It is our culture. It's because of ego grasping, believing, and this is what I'm seeing, this is all there is. That's a really powerful way that ego grasping, the root delusion, functions, that you're totally caught up in what you see and hear and taste and touch and smell, nothing more. That's the deepest of the way delusions work, the ego grasping works, you know, and that's our materialist world. That's very primordial in our mind. But now, you know, after quite a few years of trying to be a Buddhist, putting my money where my mouth is, I can now say the words, and that only really came clear when I edited this book, you know. Something dropped for me. It became clear, oh, I get it, of course you're preparing for the next life. So when you say that, everything falls into place. Everything just fits naturally. Because to keep thinking about preparing for death, this strange event that no one knows anything about, and as far as the West is concerned, you're going to fall into a black hole. And of course, who wants to fall into a black hole? Nobody. So it's really hard to get our head around it. Which is why the Buddhist teachings, in particular coming from the Vajrayana, the Tantra, coming from the Tibetan, are astonishing because they're so precise, so clear about the actual process of what occurs, which of course has to be coming from the experiences of the yogis, you know, direct experiences of the yogis. So it's extremely helpful, then you really can demystify the process and then practice throughout our life preparing for death. To be like, you know, there's enough chairs here? Good morning. There's a chair there for you? Okay, good. So, you know, be like the yogis. There's a section in the book, chapter in the book that says, death is what the yogis have been waiting for. I mean, this sounds shocking, you know, like, my God, what kind of person is that? Because we have such a different view. Death is what the yogis have been waiting for. You've got to get your head around that. And the reason is why, we'll go into it more deeply, because they've been practicing all their lives through their meditation, taking themselves through this gradual dissolution of the grosser to the subtler, to the subtlest levels of our physical and mental energy, which is exactly what's described in the death process in the Vajrayana. They've been training, and why? A practical, simple reason. Because when you get to the very subtle level of your own consciousness, which is what occurs naturally at death, and they've been preparing all their lives through their meditation, that's like the microscope of your mind. That's the level of your consciousness that's now utterly unencumbered by all the junk and the delusions and the neuroses and the sensory experiences, where you can nakedly now use that, and for as long as they like, they stay in meditation for days, weeks, months, some of the yogis, because that's what they've been waiting for. That's the level of mind that can finally get enlightened. So there's you know, it's like blissful when you understand it, and there's very helpful in Rinpoche's teachings, you know. So of course we're not that advanced, but we can prepare. So at least, and the crucial point is this, at least, and this is the point for Rinpoche, at least, at the time of death, die with virtue and peace. They're the two things, and that's our job, to help others. As Rinpoche says, if you want to help anybody at the time during their life, help them at the time of their death. And more precisely, if you've got only a 10-minute window of opportunity, well, let me know when you're going to die, Mum, and I'll be there before you stop breathing, okay? Make a date. That's when they need you most. That is when they need you most. That period. The hours before death. course, the weeks and months again, if you can. So, of course, obviously the context in this book is a slow, gradual death, because, you know, sudden death's going to happen. Nothing much you can do at that point. Except, you know, if you die peacefully, aren't you fortunate? If you die angry or you die upset or jealous or resentful, I'm sorry, not so cool. And we'll discuss all this, you know. So that it's best to die gradually. In other words, from the Buddhist point of view, you could argue it's better to be told you've got cancer. And I know this sounds so shocking for 8 years, you know. It's better to be told you've got some illness. Hopefully not much pain. So why? Because we're as thick as posts, we live in denial of death. At least then we can begin to actually confront the fact. Guess what? I'm impermanent. As long as I said we're all dying, it's just a question of time. It's like a joke. You know, we have this view that I'm a living person. I mean, it's very bizarre. The world, as far as we're concerned, is divided into living people and dying people. And hey, I am not a dying person until you're told. And then we get the shock of our lives, you know, because we don't believe we're dying. It shows how stupid we are. That's how deeply we grasp a permanence. You know, one of the main delusions, Buddha says, is why we suffer so badly. So that dealing with all this in our daily life, and so there's two things we're going to be talking about: how to live your life well, so that you're ready for death, and then how to die well. Of course, it's for you, but then you can help others. It's education we all need, as Lama Zopa says. So, of course, to take all this on board, you know, we need to again remind ourselves of Buddha's view about what it is who dies, what it is that dies, and what are the components of that person, you know. Well, as we know from all our talks, as you know from all your study and whatever, Buddha would assert that our consciousness, our mind, is what carries on, is what comes into this life from a previous life and what goes on after this life to another life. Until we've done the work, practiced to the point where we've gone beyond all the delusions and beyond all the neuroses and we don't need to get reborn. And then if we get bodhicitta, we will choose to be reborn, but now out of choice to help others. So, but normal being in samsara, quote unquote, has been caught up in this neurotic process of countless born, die, endlessly. So this already takes a time for us, you know, to get our head around this, because we're so, again, if we're Christian or Muslim, or we believe in a creator, and so God made us, and then we die, we know there is a future, and it's called heaven or hell, or whatever people talk about these days. I don't know what the teachings are. But if you're a materialist, which even if we are Christian or Muslim, we still have a very strong belief in the materialist view, that this is me, this bag of bones, and when I die there'll be a black hole, and who knows, whatever happens, happens. Or we tend to assume nobody knows. We say that with absolute conviction. We say that like as if that's a scientific truth. Oh, well, nobody knows what happens after death. Everybody says that. Everyone says that. Well, Buddha and the Buddhist views, especially the Vajrayana, do not say that. They've got a very detailed view of what happens. So that's up to us to take that on board as our hypothesis, you know, not blindly believe it. This just gets us to be intellectually lazy, you know. So we have to take on the view that our consciousness is a beginningless continuity of mental moments and an endless one. Now this is a bit cosmic to us, but it's very fascinating why it should be strange to us. Why, you know, one of the biggest questions everybody has, every single person I've ever known in the world since I've been doing this job, we all ask the same question. When did it begin? When did I begin? When did karma begin? When did anger begin? When did suffering begin? When did something begin? It's the deepest, most primordial, instinctive, seemingly natural question we all have. Well, for Buddha, it's a meaningless question. It's a bizarre question. What do you want a beginning for? But it's so shocking even to say it. We've got to look at our assumption. In other words, this is the key thing that when we start to study Buddhism in more depth, we've got to look at our assumptions. And there's an assumption here that of course there's a beginning. We never question, what do you mean there's a beginning? We go, well, of course there's a beginning. It's shocking to us to think. So how do we get our head around that? It's very simple, but it takes time, even intellectually, because we're so shocked, because the assumption in our mind is so convinced. Well, the Buddha says the universe is everything existing in the universe, like things and people and, you know, consciousness and minds and toilets and pictures and whatever. They're all impermanent. Well, one of the simple characteristics of an impermanent phenomenon is that it changes from moment to moment. Another characteristic of an impermanent phenomenon, it is the product of a series of causes. Cause and effect. Cause and effect. We say that. That's called science. You know, you get a seed, a rose seed, a bit of soil, a bit of water, a bit of time, you know, and boom, you get a rose tree every time. You know that. Once you get that law down, you know, you can replicate it every time. It's not a surprise. It's called cause and effect. But we're all looking for the first moment, you know. We want that. The first Big Bang. As His Holiness said one time, and it's, you know, paraphrasing. Big Bang? No problem. Just not the first Big Bang, that's all. That's very wonderful, you know. But we have this deep belief in a first moment. And this is very interesting, but if you take the Christian view or the Muslim view, that's answered by saying that God never began. So we see beginninglessness as something holy. Because we could say that God is beginningless. The concept of God is above and beyond everything, that didn't have a cause, that is permanent, has always existed, and is superior. All these words, you know, this is the view. Well, the Buddha would argue that's a conceptual view, a philosophical view that our minds have created. Not the view of a superior being, not the view of no, he uses the term superior being, he uses the word Buddha instead. Well, more than before that, even before you begin to become a Buddha, once you've got your first realization of emptiness, your first non-conceptual realization of emptiness, you become what's called a superior being. So he uses that term. But in terms of a Buddha, same characteristics as God, except he doesn't call him a creator. And the Buddha would say we've all got that potential. That's the major difference. So Buddha doesn't posit a higher, definitely higher, yes, but permanent, beginningless phenomenon that's the source of everything else, which means everything else has a beginning. No, not for Buddha. He says everything's beginningless. Matter, the universe consists of matter and minds, that's it. And matter, according to this model, which is how we used to talk in our time in the medieval days, in the Galileo and that mob, the elements is the characteristic of the physical world. The elements, earth, air, fire, water. Now we have millions of other elements, but that's still the model they use in Buddhism. The physical world is made of the 4 elements. So that stuff is also beginningless. Consciousness, this non-physical continuity of mental moments, like a river of mental moments. Think of it like in a linear sense. And with cause and effect, it's very obvious. So how do we get our head around this? It's not complicated. Just that experientially, we can't get it, you know. Is that if you think of the very concept of cause and effect. So if this moment we point to anything, a vase, a flower, a person, a doctor, a frame, a building, we know that thing is the product of a highly complex series of putting a bunch of things together, and then at this moment in time, there's the result of it. So at this moment in time, that is an effect, is it not, of previous causes. Whatever you refer to is an effect of previous causes. A book is the effect of previous causes. Well, then you start looking at the previous causes, you know, paper. Well, paper is the effect of previous causes. Then you look at the components of paper. Water and sand or something. It's not glass. I don't know. No, that's glass. What's paper?
Trees.
Huh?
Trees.
Trees. Okay, good. So tree, you go back before, then tree is what? An effect of many previous causes. And then you get you keep going back, and where will you end up? You're going to end back at the first moment of the universe as we know it. And then you've got to go, well, that's an effect of the previous causes, because you can't come out of nothing. If you have cause and effect, how could you possibly have an effect that didn't have a cause? There's the proof of beginninglessness. So intellectually first, be rigorous and logical. Don't see it as cosmic, you know. But necessarily, you can't possibly, if we posit cause and effect, then you cannot have an effect that didn't have a previous cause. Big Bang, no problem. Just not the first Big Bang. That's all. Well, that's what Buddha's observation is. That's it. That's the beginninglessness. You know? As mad as it sounds, even as I say the word, instinctively we don't like it. It seems like we want to go kill ourselves and we think we're beginningless, you know. That problems are beginningless. Ego is beginningless. Suffering is beginningless. Well, our potential for good is beginningless as well, so just as well, isn't it? This is a fundamental point for the Buddha, just intellectually to understand, to comprehend it, you know. I mean, intellectually, forget experientially, that means clairvoyance. When you're a Buddha, finally you'll see it all. Buddha would say. So we take this view that our consciousness, our thoughts and feelings and emotions, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of our inner being, our consciousness, is this non-physical energy that has got its own momentum, its own continuum, its own entity. It goes back and back and back and back and back and back and back. And crucially, whatever goes on in it every millisecond is this process of cause and effect, or the law of karma when it comes to sentient beings. That whatever we think and do and say, just naturally are the causes that will bring future effects. Guess what? Hardly rocket science. And working intimately closely with the physical world. There are detailed descriptions of this intimate relationship, Lama Zopa says, between the internal, which is mind, and the external, which is the elements, in the Kala Chakra teachings in Vajrayana, you know. of this process of the intimate relationship between internal and external, between the physical and the mental worlds. It's highly dealt with in immense depth in Vajrayana, and indeed that's the model for the Tibetan medical system. And that's what we're going to discuss when we talk about the death process. So this whole view that's discussed in this book and in the Buddhist teachings is based upon this assumption that the consciousness is not physical, is not a product of a creator, and is not the handiwork of mummy and daddy. That's a fact for the Buddha. It takes time to see this, even hear what he's saying, you know. That we are in charge of these effects. We are the effect of previous causes, and the main causes are the ones that happened in our mind before we were Robina and Fred and Mary, or dog or cat or rat, you know. The law of karma, in other words. And that this consciousness comes, you know, based upon many causes and conditions coming together, in particular at the time of death. That's the point. Before you stop breathing, those hours, they're the crucial time. Before you stop breathing, the death process, which is described in the Vajrayana, which we're going to go into, which is described in terms of 8 stages, and this gradual deconstruction of the various components of the person. So the first 4 of these 8 occur before you stop breathing. So it's about the second, maybe it's hard to deduce, you know, they all have slightly different views of it, but it would seem it's about the second or the third of these stages, when you start to seriously lose the plot, that's when the karmic seeds that we're lugging around in our bank vault, and we've got trillions of karmic seeds in our bank vaults since beginningless time, because there's nothing that we think or do or say that goes astray. Everything we think or do or say since beginningless time, as mad as it sounds, drops little seeds into our bank vaults. Buddha clearly doesn't talk about bank vaults, but I like that view. Whatever's my word, it's all. We're lugging these bank vaults around of trillions of karmic seeds, of impressions, of programming. So before we stop breathing is the crucial period when the seeds that will determine your next life are triggered. So therefore, and this is the fundamental point which we're now going to unpack, that's when we're needed most to help a person, to help them through this extremely fearful process. So from another point of view, another model that's taught in the sutra teachings about the 12 links of dependent arising, Lama Zopa, there's a small chapter, a section in the book as well about this, that at the time of death, the 12 links, some of these components have a very powerful role at the time of death. And in particular, there's 2, the 8th and 9th of these 12 links, which is sort of like, there's 2 extra strong, extra powerful, intensely extra powerful levels of attachment, of craving. They're called usually craving and grasping. And these kick in intensely powerfully, intensely more powerfully than during the rest of life, naturally at the time of death. So then death naturally, for most people, for most sentient beings, is deeply fearful. And it's this attachment and grasping that makes it fearful. And even more precisely, this grasping, this 9th link, is finally the trigger, that is the thing, the component that triggers the karmic seed in your bank vault, that will be the one that throws you into the next life. So in our case, as Lama Zopa says, at our past life, it could have been a kangaroo or a dog or a bug, whatever, or a human, that at the time of death, that this particular grasping, which was so powerful, which is a delusion, but I'm going to talk about this too, but how we can use it, it's very skillful. We had to have had not only all the other conditions that give us a human life, but we must have had very strong grasping at a human life. One of the main causes to help trigger that virtuous karmic seed that was triggered before we even stopped breathing. And this is weeks before even maybe our mother and daddy had even met. So it's like a joke to say that they made us. Buddha says they've got nothing to do with it. They're lying there having fun, and we butt our noses in, we come along. We've got the karma to be born to them, but they do not give you love, anger, hate, psychosis, music, or anything else. We bring that stuff with us. That's all triggered before we even stop breathing in the past life. This is Buddha's view. We're the boss, we made ourselves. So what I'm getting at here, in just general, we're going to go into these parts. The period before you stop breathing, when this actual 8 stages of the death process seem to start, and they're very vague about how long it takes, would indicate from Rinpoche's discussion teachings that it's maybe a couple of hours, but some people say it could be longer. But it's that period before you lose the plot, when you need to be 2 things, peaceful and virtuous. Why? Because that state of mind will allow the grasping to trigger a virtuous karmic seed from your virtuous bank vault that'll throw you into, in our case, into a human mummy's womb. And if the mind is not peaceful and not virtuous, which is natural if it's not peaceful, it's just natural, then, your negative bank vaults will be triggered. The little door will open, up will come, like the ATM. You put it in, out comes the card, or the money. Anyway, I'm getting carried away here. Okay. Are we communicating so far?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Good. So obviously the best way to prepare for death is to live life well. It's a bit like saying, how we think about death. Well, when it happens, I'll be okay. Because we just don't want to know about it. But it's a bit like saying, you've got a driving test in a couple of months. I'll be okay on the day. I'll work it out on the day. I don't think so. I'm sorry, you just won't. It's practical, We know you've got to prepare. And that's when you'll be fearless at the time. If you're going to not be ready for your driving test, of course you'll have a complete panic attack at the time. You'll be a disaster. So the more you practice every day now, then the driving test will just be completely natural. You'll be so familiar. You'll do everything you have to do. It's obvious. So we all know that. We call it preparing for something. We know that. We know that. We know that. We do that in our lives very well. But because death is this seemingly mysterious event that everyone thinks no one knows anything about, so then we tend to live in denial of it. Can't stand the thought of it. And of course we can't stand the thought of it because we're so attached to me, isn't it? This concept of me and the body, me and mine, me especially, me and the body. Totally, primordially, frantically, vampirishly attached, So the thought of not being me really is beyond terror. And we can't articulate it, we can't explain it, we don't know what happened, so we live in denial. Of course, what else can you do with something terrifying? So this is why, first of all, the obvious way to prepare for death is live a decent life. Live a proper life. Live with knowledge and awareness and understanding of this process. And even better than just living a good life, but actually go through the process, meditate on this process, which is one of the very many practices that Rinpoche recommends, this process that does occur at the time of death. The greatest yogis, like I said, they really are on the case. They really actually can do it, but we can at least imagine doing it. Imagine attempting to recognize the stages as they occur, So the first obvious approach, which is taught, as we know, in the Tibetan teachings, in the path to enlightenment, in the course, to Buddhahood, the Lam Rim, the very first entry level into Buddhism is to think about impermanence. It's one of Buddha's extensive teachings, actually. Extensive. So all of Buddha's teachings, one way of saying what they are is from his experiential point of view, how things are. And what he's saying is, and why he would suggest to us we think about impermanence, the obvious reason is because we obviously think the opposite, which is meaning we're permanent. We have one of the many misconceptions in our mind that grasps, as Rinpoche calls it, grasping at permanent me. This is intense and utterly primordial and natural in every being. So natural, we don't question it in our culture, So one of the first ways to counteract this is taking these 3 points that Lama Atisha, the 11th century great master who was in India and who was invited to Tibet by the king at the time and then spent the rest of his life there teaching. And his text, Lamp for the Path, is the basis of the text that Tsongkhapa, our lineage Lama, is he there? I can't turn around. Is he there? No there? No Lama Tsongkhapa? Where is he? Where is he? Oh, there he is. That's Lama Yeshe, as Lama Tsongkhapa. Oh, he's not here. How interesting.
We do have one.
We do have some Lama Tsongkhapa statues? Judy, where are our Lama Tsongkhapa statues? Judy! Where are they? Where? He's awfully small. My God, he's about an inch big.
Yeah.
I think we have to grow him up, I think.
And we have all the photos
at the back.
At the back.
Where? Lama Tsongkhapa. Yeah, Tibetans say you're supposed to point like that. It's rude to do that. We should point with our hands like this. That's version, what is that? Variations of Lama Tsongkhapa. Okay, there he is. He's like you have to put him under a microscope. All right, he's there. Okay. Thank you. So anyway, he's our lineage Lama. He's like our patron saint, isn't he? Lama Tsongkhapa. And that one is Lama Yeshe, but in the aspect of Lama Tsongkhapa. You can see with his yellow pointy hat, Okay. So he was the 14th century, and he was the one who put together this packaging, this course to Buddhahood called the Lam Rim. And in there, entry-level junior school is think about impermanence. Think about death and impermanence. So Lord Buddha's teachings of impermanence are extensive. And in fact, the Theravadan meditators, their main object of meditation is what's called subtle impermanence. You know, which is counteracting the very first view that the Hindus had, which is where Buddha diverged, of a permanent, partless self. That's actually subtle impermanence counteracts that. But sometimes it can be misunderstood for emptiness. But that's the very first, already it's profound, the teachings on subtle impermanence. But the teacher doesn't bother with subtle impermanence because we get very carried away and very lyrical about it all. It's all very marvellous. He gets us to get out, right in the face, eyeball to eyeball, gross impermanence. Not just impermanence of cups and toilets and relationships, but guess what? Impermanence of me. And what do we call that? Death. So his agenda there is twofold. One, to think about impermanence, but his real agenda is to give us a wake-up call. Because when we think about death, we realise my life could be short. I will end at some point. So he wants us to be energised by that, to not want to waste this precious life. So his agenda is that. But meanwhile, we get the business about impermanence. But the wake-up call is the main one. I mustn't waste this precious life, So the three main points he talks about, pretty obvious. The first one is that death is definite. Death is definite, I mean, you definitely will die. So we go, yeah, I know that. Tell us something more intellectual, please. No, we don't get it. We're as thick as posts because we're living in denial. So we know the words easily. We all know we'd be embarrassed to say we won't die. But we live in every atom of our being. We don't live our life like that. And that's why we have to look at the assumptions inside us. All the assumptions, everything we say and do, the assumption is of a permanent me. That's why we get surprised if someone does die. Oh, but I just spoke to her yesterday. As if somehow that's proof that you shouldn't die today. But we say it like that. We say it like that. We say it like that. Even you could argue the fact that we're even surprised or shocked when a person dies is the proof that we grasp at permanent. Because if you expect something to happen, you know it will happen, you're not surprised when it happens, is it? It's obvious. So we're so shocked when we think about death. But we don't think of it the right way. So the way to apply this little tool, death is definite. The Buddha says, Tsongkhapa says, a teacher says, meditate on it. So of course we've got the confusing meaning about the word meditate. Like I said last week, the actual Tibetan word for to meditate, the verb is the verb to familiarise. That's a bit shocking. To meditate, they hear the word to familiarise. So when someone says go meditate on death, we go, oh, what's that mean, They say, go and familiarise your mind with death. Oh, that makes sense. Think about it. Use your noggin. Not surprising, not complicated. So how do you think about death as definite? Well, it's not complicated. It isn't complicated because you just use your experience of daily life, Every day you wake up, you're going to see dead ants, dead rats, you're going to hear about it, you're going to read in the newspapers and the iPad and everywhere else. You're never stopping about people dying every day, every kind of death. Natural death, abortions, war death, terrorism death, murder, husbands beating, all the time, never stopping. But what happens is we don't think about it properly. We think about it from the point of view of gossip. We think about it from the point of view of anger. How dare that person kill that person? Or that poor person will have compassion. We're not getting the main point. So applying all these tools, the way they talk in the Lamb Room, is very simple, but we don't quite get it. It just means, oh my God, how you'd when you see the ant, see the person, read the news. If you're applying this particular tool in your toolkit, how it would sound would be like this. My God, that person. You think of that person, that ant. They thought they were permanent like everybody else. That they are dead. Death is definite. They died, They didn't expect to die. The person who died. You think of the person who suddenly died in the war. They were sitting there, believing they're permanent. They died. Definite. Death is definite. You think about it. That's how you think about it. Not the gossip, not the anger, not the fear, not the jealousy, not the resentment, not all that. But think about it. Wow, death is definite. It'll prove it every time. You'll get a realization of death is definite pretty quickly if you apply that view. Death is definite. There it is, the proof. Buddha's been telling me death's definite. There it is. And then you think of the person. They didn't think they were going to die. Why? Because they believe they're permanent. Big shock. Many points to discuss there. The next one, getting closer to home, should scare the life out of us. The time of death is not definite. This is really scary. And this we cannot bear to think about. Because we have such intense grasping at being permanent. We do intelligently know we're going to die, and we'll say it, we joke about it. We prepare for it by getting our coffin ready and writing our wills. But we don't believe it for 1 second. And we won't, and we do know, if we are going to say I'm going to die, definitely for all of us, even if we're old, death is a long way off. So the very helpful way I like this view, I try to apply it, to get the feeling about death, about we're heading to death. They often say we're one day closer to death. One day closer to death. And as soon as we hear it, we can't stand it, you know, but it's a fact. So, you know, if, say, even for me, I you know, the last few days I've been walking from the house, my flat, 12 minutes away, according to Google, you know, my map says 12 minutes. So I'm already familiar with the route, right? So when I leave the flat, and as I'm walking, we all know this, don't we? Whether the journey is a 12-hour journey, you know, on a flight to London or whatever it is, 36 hours or 24, whatever it is, or a 10-minute walk. We all have this view. Think of what I'm saying. It's very vivid. We have a conceptual sense of how long that will take. And we prepare for it. So as I walk out of the flat, and then I gradually get to the end of the street, and as I'm doing it, I'm mentally having a sense of moving away from the flat and moving towards Buddha House. You get that point, don't you? If you're driving here, it's the same, and you see all the local signposts, and, you know, oh, there's that McDonald's, I'm only 10 minutes away, I'm 5 minutes away. It's a very vivid experience, isn't it? We're getting, as we keep moving, we're moving towards Buddha House. Do you agree with that? Yes. Well, that's how we should think about death. But we don't. We wake up in the morning feeling just like we felt when we were 10, 11, 12, 2, 64, however old we are. Brand new day, here I am, alive and permanent, you know. I'm so fit and well, you know. Do you understand? Yes. We don't feel we're moving towards death. We don't ever think I'm further away from birth and getting closer to death, which is a fact. We can't stand to hear it because of this grasping at permanent me. A lie in our mind, a lie, deeply instinctive, because we can't stand the thought of the truth, the fact that I'm impermanent, you know. So thinking about this every day. Now, as Ober says, the best way to think is, I could die today. Well, that's hilarious to us. And the fact is, even as I say it, I could die today. As I say it, believe me, I don't believe it. Check yourself. I don't believe it. Why? Because this grasping at permanent is so ingrained. And when we understand how deeply ingrained these misconceptions are, we won't beat ourselves up. We'll just have to keep repeating the truth until eventually the penny drops, you know. This is really intense. And even if we're told we're going to die, we think that's permanent. A friend of mine was divorced from her husband. They were Buddhist. And he got this virulent cancer, and he's going to be dead in 2 months. So she went back to help him die. She'd do his practices every day with him, helping him die. And then 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, he didn't die. He became a living person again, so they started fighting again, and they had to split up again. Because even the certainty of death is not certain. We're so stupid, you know. A friend of mine in Los Angeles, I always quote these two stories. A friend of mine, he went there to help his daddy die of cancer. Well, daddy got better. They literally were having a party to celebrate. And next day he died of a heart attack. So I mean, we are ridiculous, right? Because of attachment, because we can't, and then grasping at permanence, and they're so linked, you know. It's very fascinating. So to really get the realization of death from these simple 2 points, and there's, you know, various other points in them, they seem so simple and boring, but it is beyond profound. So the third point is the action point. The third point is the point, and the third point is this: given. And this is the crucial point. Given that my consciousness is a beginningless continuity of mental moments, given that it's also endless and will go somewhere else after this death, given that every millisecond of what I think and do and say will necessarily leave seeds in my mind, program my mind, given that every single virtuous seed will ripen as happiness in the future, happy rebirth, happy tendencies, happy experiences, happy environment, given that every negative seed will ripen as suffering, suffering rebirth, suffering tendencies, suffering experiences, suffering environment, and let's face it, given, no-brainer, I don't want suffering, I do want happiness, honey, then it follows logically, does it not, that at the time of death, at that time when my mind leaves my body, the only thing, this is a practical issue, do not think of it as religion, it's practical for the Buddha. The only thing that is of any use to me whatsoever at that point is the virtuous seeds. That's it. So simple, so logical. Not my body, not my husband, not my pension plan, not the children, not my reputation. Not, in other words, this is too scary and it sounds fundamentalist, but it's logical, it's a practical issue. Not all the things we spend our lives thinking about. What do we spend our lives thinking about? the body, first of all, the food we put in the body, you know, all these things. It always sounds so fundamental when we hear the lamas talk like it's like they're being sort of a bit sort of like fundamentalists, yeah. It sounds too shocking to us. But it's quite illogical. In other words, a really simple example for me is this. If you know, like preparing for death. I remember actually, what's his name? You know, old age, you do forget names. My grandma told me when I was 11 I'd forget names, and I told her, no, I won't. Well, I do, you know. What's his name? The Apple fellow was my favourite person. Thank you, Steve Jobs. God almighty, I'm embarrassed. Anyway, Steve Jobs, I love that man. I read his biography. And then I read about from his sister how he died. He'd had cancer for many years, and you could tell from his writings he really was in touch with impermanence. He was great, you know. So his sister, they'd been, what do you call it when you're given away when you're a baby? Or orphaned. No, the other one. Adopted, thank you. See? Can't remember words. Adopted, given away, right. So then they met later in life, and she's a writer, so she wrote about the day he died. So she said she got there in time. They said, you better come and hurry, he's going to be dead soon. So he's as skinny as a rake. He had this liver cancer or something, I can't remember.
Pancreatic.
Thank you very much, pancreatic cancer. So he's lying on the bed with on the bed, his wife's there, and his daughters are there, something like this. And the way she told the story was very sweet. She said something like this, and this is my point now. He was packed, ready to go. So if you think you might have a magnificent house in the best suburbs, I look at Adelaide houses, I can't believe how nice these suburbs are with your tiled footpaths. I mean, tiled footpaths. I've never seen that anywhere on earth. Tiled footpaths. I mean, I can see the concrete, you know, the other black stuff's taken over, but tiled footpaths. I don't think I've seen a suburb on earth with tiled footpaths. Even Beverly Hills doesn't have tiled footpaths. You have these magnificent trees, you know. I mean, Adelaide's so blessed with the bits I've seen anyway. I can't believe it, you know. Anyway, where was I? Okay, you can live in your beautiful suburb and everybody's got their houses. I notice all the fences, their gardens, the architecture. Beautiful. Some places are beautiful. You own all that, okay? You have all that. Now, even if you just want to go away on a holiday, you've got to pack a few things, right? You can't take your whole bloody house, can you? You know that, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it? You pack a few things in your suitcase. This is the other point now. This sounds hilarious, but it's the point. You know also, let's say you live in your lovely house and your possessions and you're every day and you're this and your husband, your kids and your wife and you're that and you're something, you're 2.5 something and you're this. You understand my point? Not being cynical. The things we think about all day. And then you want a holiday. So and it's going to be, a holiday is always in the future. So naturally you decide, first of all you have to decide you want a holiday, right? Then you have to decide where you're going to go, don't you? Like, I'll go to France. And then you just don't go, oh, I really must go on a holiday to France. Oh, I really must go. And then you wait for the day to come and you're not ready. You'd be in trouble, wouldn't you? You wouldn't be packed ready to go. You'd have a panic attack and you haven't even got a flight. You've got in your calendar the 12th of January, but you forgot to buy the flight, you forgot to pack your bags. You'll be in trouble, right? You'll be having a panic attack. Do you agree? Yes. You lost the plot. Well, you're going to prepare, aren't you? And I mean this so sincerely. What would you do? You'd plan to know where you want to go. Well, here, and I'm going to talk about this too, you've got to plan where you want to go after you die. This sounds so hilarious, I tell you. And for Buddha, there's two options. And this became clear for me doing this book as well. One is a human rebirth, a decent human rebirth, and the other is Amitabha's Pure Land. And I'll go into this in a minute. I'm giving a summary of the whole book here. I think I'll have to have a tea break soon or something. So you've got to decide where you want to go, don't you? I want to go to France, please. No one says, what an idiot. Fancy making a plan. You know about plans. So then you decide you want to go to France, and then you have to pack ready to go, and you've got to do other things like buy the air ticket, know the route, how to get to the airport, and put your few things in your little suitcase, and leave your stuff behind. We know that. Well, of course, we think we're going to come back, so we don't mind. Isn't it? So that's how you prepare for death. So what do you need when you go to the next life? Well, you can't bring your house. You can't bring your hubby. You can't bring your two-rack garden, something in your tiled footpath, and your this and your that, your electricity, your light, your internet and your things. You can't lug all that with you on a ship to go all the way to France behind you lugging it, can you? You can't do that. It will be kind of mentally ill. Well, you can't take anything else with you when you die, okay, to the next life. You can't. I mean, I know we think it, but we don't think it. It sounds like religion. We're not used to thinking it, you know. Do you understand? Yes. We've got to get used to these thoughts if we like Buddhist teachings. If you don't, it's okay. Just think it's funny and leave it there. Yeah, it's okay. So the only thing you do need is your virtuous seeds. That's it. You certainly don't want your negative ones. They are like the worst. And not to mention you can't bring your body and everything else. You have to leave it behind. So why not start practicing now? Giving up attachment to those things. You know, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have your beautiful husband, your gorgeous house in Toorak Gardens and your nice paved, you know, your tiled pathways and everything else. You can have all that. Enjoy it for what it is, but knowing it's impermanent. The thing is, you know, and that's what I find interesting. When we tend to think of that, we get a bit depressed. Well, if it's all impermanent, why bother in the first place? But when you go on a holiday, that's impermanent, isn't it? You know you're going to go for 2 weeks. You don't go, well, what's the point of going for 2 weeks? It will end. Why bother? Do you understand? But we know it's impermanent, and guess what? When it's impermanent, and you know it's only 2 weeks, you'll enjoy it even more. You won't want to waste the 2 weeks. You won't want to. And this is the problem. Because we think life is forever, we take it all for granted, we become lazy, we get angry, we get caught up in misery, because we forget it's impermanent. We forget it's like a holiday. We forget that we have to leave it and go to the next one. Of course we do. This is the problem. I remember one time I used this example. Years ago I did an editing retreat. I do what I call editing retreats sometimes. And it was in America, and I went to Puerto Rico. It's a gorgeous little place, a little island, you know, in the middle of the ocean that America bought to be strategic, you know, a couple hundred years ago, I forget. And they talk about the Puerto Ricans like some of the happiest people on earth. They are really very happy people. They're very interesting people. There's about 4 million of them, little island, you know. And it was in December, which is winter there, of course, in America. So it was so nice to be in this lovely place. And someone gave me a little spot on the southern part in this nice pink resort, you know, with all these pink apartments and near the beach with the ocean, all blah, blah, blah. It was very gorgeous. And I had 9 weeks. I remember 9 weeks. And that I had a vivid sense of this 9 weeks. It was so delicious. And at the end of the 9 weeks, I had to go to Boston where it was like 20 below, you know, degrees below. And I thought, no way. So this 9 weeks is very delicious. And I did some editing, but also enjoyed. So I bought this pink, what's that cloth you use for bathers? Stretchy stuff. Thank you. Well, I bought this couple of yards of pink, nice pink lycra, and I wore it like a sarong. I thought, well, no one knows I'm a Buddhist nun because I had a bald head. They think I've got cancer or something, but they all knew I was a Buddhist nun. And somebody, they'll go like this, you know. So anyway, I lived in my pink sarong, and I swam in my pink sarong, and I lay on the grass and sunbaked in my pink sarong, and I went to the restaurants in my pink sarong, and I edited my pink sarong, and I slept in my pink sarong for 9 weeks, really enjoying myself. So, but I realised it was impermanent. And so because of that, every day I look in the calendar, 8 weeks, 7 weeks, you get nervous. It's ending, isn't it? So then you don't want to waste it. So imagine if I forgot it was impermanent, or I forgot. You know, I start getting angry at the next door guy because he played loud music, and suing the fellow down the road because he looked at me the wrong way, and getting all possessive for the cushions and the gas stove and my garden. It's my apartment. How ridiculous when Rita, the real estate lady, would have been dragging me out kicking and screaming at the end of 9 weeks, right? Because I forgot it was impermanent. This is what we do. We forget it's we don't even know it's impermanent. We believe it's permanent. So, practical. It's like being on a holiday. We're on a holiday, basically. It's the way to think about it. These tricks, you've got to use tricks for your mind, that's all. To face facts, you know, to face the fact that we're impermanent. And then not just impermanent, but at the time of death, the only thing you want to have packed, ready to go, is your virtuous seeds. So when you start packing them, not then, baby, too late. Now you start. Now, giving up attachment to the hubby and the pension and this and that and the children and the house. Meanwhile, enjoying them. You don't have to chuck them out and be miserable and sad and lonely and homeless. You can have your cake and eat it too. That's a fact. You've got to practice though. When you know it's impermanent, you'll still enjoy it all the more, and then you'll let go more easily when things go wrong. You know, it's just practical. It's an attitude. Like all this stuff, it's an attitude. You know, so skillful. But not only prepare for death, but then let's just organise our next life, you know. And I mean, this is something really only became crystal clear for me, or began to become clear when I edited this book. The last chapter that I got for the book, that I felt the book wasn't ready, and there was one piece that was missing. I didn't know what it was, and then I got this from Holly, Lama Zopa's Australian, one of his attendants, before the book got finished, and she sent me this brief transcription of Rinpoche's commentary on Amitabha's Pure Land, Amitabha and Amitabha's Pure Land, when he gave initiation in San Jose, this was a few years ago. And I'd never thought of Amitabha's, I never thought of Pure Lands, period. I thought, I'm a Lama Tsongkhapa girl, I'm talking about perfect human rebirth, I'm going to get born as a human being, blah, 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 you know. But now I'm a complete fan for Amitabha's Pure Land, and I put it on the end of my itinerary. And I figured, like, even from here I go to Sydney, I figured I might go to Amitabha's Pure Land first. So it's on my itinerary everywhere, it's implied, you know. Got to get used to that idea. I've decided, you know, so I'm going to go to Amitabha's Pure Land. And the last prayer I do at the end of night, the day before I go to sleep, all of the practices are in the book. There's about 80 practices in the book. One of them is this beautiful, beautiful prayer, Aspirations, by Tsongkhapa, praying to go to Amitabha's Pure Land. Just beautiful aspirations, you know. So it's the last thing I think of when I die, sleep. Knowing I could wake up in Amitabha's Pure Land, hopefully. Or when I die, I'll go to Amitabha's Pure Land. I could go to Melbourne first, or I could go to Amitabha's Pure Land, whichever one. So I've decided. Then I figure if I miss the plane to Amitabha's Pure Land, I'll get to a human one, so it's okay. So you aim for the best, you know. No, I mean it. This has taken me 40 years to be able to say it, okay? So it does take time. I'm a bit slow on the uptake. Are we communicating here?
Yes.
It's taken me 40 years. I met the Lamas 40 years ago in June. Just saying that to show how long it takes. Our minds are so stupid. It's my mind. So now I can say, okay, ready for the next life. So if you want to go on a holiday, you just don't go, oh, may I go on a holiday? Where do you want to go? Oh, I don't mind, whatever's best. That's what we say when we think about rebirth. Oh, whatever's best. Excuse me, make a decision. You're the boss here. There's no creator who's going to organise it for you. And most of us, I think, even still, I can see this inside us. We have this feeling, like, you know, my teacher's Lama Zopa. I kind of have this feeling, well, Lama Zopa can see I'm going to be a good girl. He'll take care of me. No, you got to take care of yourself, okay? You got to decide where you want to go. Not just, oh, Lama Zopa will get me a ticket to France. I'll be okay. I'll be okay on the day. No, I've got to know what I want packed, ready to go. I want to know what seeds I need in my mind. I want to know what type of rebirth I want, and I can plan for it. And the more likely we know that you plan for something and we're very good at it, you'll get that exact result. That's how karma works. As Lama Zopa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish. This is the meaning of karma. And this too takes time for us, for the penny to drop. Because we really don't believe we're in charge. We think it's someone out there is in charge, you know. We don't believe it. It takes time at this one. So prepare what type of rebirth you want. When you map it all out like this, so there's the Christians, the same as the Christian who's got real faith in God. They will die blissfully happy. They know they're going to go to heaven. Well, given that we all create every bit of reality we've got, they're absolutely right. They will. Because we create our reality, you know. Buddha says. There's no heaven out there from its own side. It's the creation of our own mind. No Amitabha's Buddha land from its own side. It's the creation of our mind, our virtue. When we understand emptiness and karma, this all makes sense, you know. Okay, so that's a summary of the book really, but then all the details, we'll go into the details. It's knowing how to live your life and to prepare for death. Then to know how to the different practices to do at different stages. The reason behind all of it is so that when the time of death starts, the hours before you stop breathing, the mind is ready, completely programmed, and virtuous karmic seeds will be triggered, and you'll be programmed to go to another decent human body or Amitabha's Pure Land. That's it. That's the point of the entire book. And everything in the book is to help you do that. Everything in the book is to help you help others do that. That's the essence of it, actually. That's the essence of it. So that might not be the material that's used. Some of you might not be Buddhist, and maybe you think I'm talking absolute nonsense. That's okay, but whatever. But there's some practical stuff in here too. If you're a Christian, there's a lot of practical advice as well. You know. So before we go and start going into more detail on different things, how about some questions?
Robina.
Yeah.
Just, is there any more to the story of Steve Jobs' sister talking about? You started.
Oh yes, there is. There is. I forgot. There is. There is. The lovely part of the story. I like this. She said she was there, and let's say, what's your name?
Gordana. Gordy.
Gordana.
Gordana.
Gordana. Pretend Gordana is Steve Jobs, and I'm the sister, and I'm looking at him, and in front between us are his two daughters, and she's looking at him. They're looking at him, and she can see Steve's face, and she said, and I forget the word, something like he looked really completely blissful, looking into the eyes of his daughters, begging them to forgive him for having to leave them. Not, oh, I don't want to leave you, cry, cry, grasp, grasp. No, blissful. And then he looked over their shoulder into the distance, she said, and went, oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow. And then he died. Well, there's another aspect of what happens. As you go through the death process, what it is this gradual deconstruction of the grosser elements and the grosser parts of your consciousness, which means you're getting closer to your subtle consciousness, which just naturally is clairvoyant. So he's literally seeing a blissful future life. I was very happy for him. That's why some people die with panic and hysteria, seeing demons and being attacked, because they're seeing their suffering future life. Which is why it's so important to help a person before they stop breathing, because that's when the karmic seed is triggered, and what it's determined by is whether the mind is peaceful and therefore virtuous, or not peaceful and therefore non-virtuous. Because peaceful has a natural relationship with virtue. Check the last time you're loving, compassionate, your mind's peaceful. Check the last time you were angry, jealous, freaked out. So the mind needs to be peaceful. That's your job as the helper. Help them be peaceful. And other one to help is have imprints in the mind of the Buddha's name. Or if they're Christian, talk about we'll go into all those things. But that's the nice end of the story. I like that part. Any questions?
I've heard you talk about your friends.
Take the mic, darling.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hello. I've heard you talk about...
Doesn't seem to be on, Matthew. Go on.
I've heard you talk about your friends in prison.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about, we don't know the definite time of death.
That's
Some
right.
of them may well do. They may well know their definite time of death.
Mm-hmm.
If they've had enough time and take on Buddhist beliefs,
Yeah.
have you seen or do you
Yes.
know, do they die with this peace and
Well,
virtue?
I can't say because I wasn't there at the second, but the most recent example I've had is a fellow in March in Georgia, and he was given permission by the prison to receive phone calls from anybody. So I'd met him. He had other teachers as well who were helping him, but I'd had contact with him, and so I spoke to him a couple of days before they killed him. And he was completely ready. He was as ready as he could possibly be. He said he was practicing Vajrasattva and he had Lama Zopa in his heart. And so he was clear, he had friends around him, and he was just preparing day and night for exactly that. Day and night. Now, still, it doesn't mean that he mightn't freak out, because sometimes they kill them in a monstrous way and they suffer terribly. But he said in his case, what they do in Georgia is they knock him out completely, they sedate them, knock him out. But that doesn't mean he's unconscious. The West thinks he's unconscious, but that's his subtle mind. So if his mind isn't peaceful, then his mind won't be happy even when he's unconscious, because his subtle mind will be there. But still, that's one point. So yes, the one person I've spoken to most recent, close to his death. But the other point is this. Just because they know the time of their death doesn't mean they still won't die sooner. A friend of mine on death row in Kentucky, preparing for his death date, and he got leukemia and died months before. So then it still took him by surprise. It's not certain. Maybe a minute before you can say, okay, death really is coming now. Midnight, I'm ready. But then still, even. So then at least the ones on death row, like my friend Mitch in Kentucky, who's become a Buddhist since he's been there 30 years. He's a marvellous person, And he says, Robina, I'm ready for that electric jolt. And he meditates every day on compassion for the person who's going to kill him. He's really readying his mind to have compassion and to be all his practices to be ready when he dies. So the best he can do. How amazing! And the fact is, we're all going to die at some point. Whether someone kills you or not, it's not the difference. What's the difference? In the end, it sounds shocking, but you're all going to die. So he's really preparing. How fantastic! Wake up call. Isn't it?
Then on from that too, those who, like you say, may suffer, they might not die instantly. You're talking about going through the stages of death and knowing when you're separating. If they have prepared enough, do you think in your mind that they're then okay to go through, say, that 15 minutes of suffering?
You've got to be a really advanced yogi to actually, even if you're dying peacefully, you've got to be a yogi to really actually go through the actual experience of being, okay, we all go to sleep, right? We all have dreams. So if you can imagine deciding to go to sleep and be super conscious at every stage, all the way, never losing consciousness at an ever subtle level, and then consciously waking up again, I don't think so. You've got to be really a greatest yogi to have done that all your life. And even then it can still be fearful. But you've got to, they're literally in charge of the process. So that's if they die. So then for many of us who will also die peacefully, at least we practice it a bit. And we can have faith and people around us and thinking of our guru and doing our mantras, and that'll help us stay steady. But still, it's fearful. Until you realise emptiness, it's fearful. And then, not to mention, if you die with a lot of fear, then it's a nightmare, a disaster. It's not easy. It's actually quite powerful. So this is why, like in the West, there's a lot of talk about people, euthanasia and having the right to kill themselves, isn't it? But I think the thing that's really clear, it sounds intellectually and politically really perfect. You can't argue that a person has a right to. You can't argue with a person's human rights. It's true. But there's no, I would suggest, of course in the West, taking the Buddha's view, there's no comprehension of the level of grasping that naturally occurs when you start the death process that we, of course, don't know anything about in the West. No one ever factors that in. So you can have all this rational idea of killing yourself and then completely have a panic attack at the time of death and go straight to the lower rungs. Of course, we don't think of that in the West. Of course you don't, So you can't argue with our rights. But, rights come with responsibility and knowledge, So it's an interesting point. This fear is the one, which is why all the more reason why the greatest gift you could possibly give to anybody is to be with them in the weeks and months before they die, and then actually the time, like literally, and we're going to go into more detail about that. That's the most precious gift you could give. For your dog, the mouse, the ant, the same. Don't just kill your animal, call it putting it down, acting like you're so holy at the vet. Help your little mouse, help the little ant, help the kangaroo, help your dog. With holding on to it, giving it, listen to Dharma, we'll discuss all this. So it can die peacefully and virtuously, and you can trigger a virtuous seed before it stops breathing and send it off to human rebirth. Yes. Where's the mic, please?
Bring that one.
Yes.
When my mother was dying, she went into a coma.
Yeah.
And I got on a plane. She was in Arizona.
Yeah.
My brothers in Israel got on planes.
Yeah.
She died when we were all in the plane.
Yes.
And I hear this over and over again, that the person dying waits for the person to leave the room, and then they die.
I don't know. I hear that too.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
what is that
Yeah,
a
I understand.
person wants to be alone?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I can even posit that. I wouldn't know about that aspect. But all I can talk about is this. What I can say, we're going to go into some more detail, is we have to learn to understand the depth of the craving and grasping and fear-based attachment at the time of death. What time's our lunch?
12:30.
Oh, okay, good. We can start doing that now. I think let's just start doing this now. Can we do this? I think we'll do this now. Okay. Okay, attachment, as we've been talking often enough, is multifaceted, okay? It's multifaceted. So one of the basic, and it's such a simple word, but we don't really get it. As Lama Yeshe, I always quote this, as Lama Yeshe says, I can tell you about attachment for one whole year. And even, it's so subtle, that even, if you've gone to the stages of realizing your own liberation, which is the Hinayana level of understanding things, even though there's still levels of attachment. According to the Mahayana view, in other words, it's beyond primordial, the subtlety of attachment. Don't underestimate it. So broadly speaking, it's multifaceted. The most basic level is this deep feeling of dissatisfaction, like we've talked, a primordial sense of a separate, lonely, bereft, dissatisfied me. On the basis of this is this deep hankering after something that obviously we think we're missing, such that when we get it, it'll fill up the gaping hole. Then there's a manipulating to get it. Then there's a possessing of it and the exaggerating of its deliciousness and the holding on to it and seeing it as permanent. All this is a part of attachment. Well, another way of talking about attachment is, our mind has never stopped thinking about things, isn't it? Chatting away, chatting. And part of what's happening is we're always anticipating. Well, now I'll get up in the morning, now I'll go here, now I'll get my breakfast, and I'll go to work, and I'll drive the car, and I'll turn left, and I'll do here, and I'll go there, and I've got all my jobs to do. We're endlessly moving, we're endlessly doing things, aren't we? Endlessly making plans, and now we'll do this, and now we'll do that. Do you agree with this? It's always looking forward, isn't it? It's like a motor propelling us forward. That's the energy of attachment. And it's all conceptually based. And and look what happens when you're depressed. That motor kind of dies down, doesn't it? And you go and you sink into this hole. Because why? There's nothing to look forward to, is there? Can you hear my point?
Yes.
You're just full of despair and hopelessness and you want to die, So then that's because attachment is deflated, and that's now aversion and depression. So attachment energy, we don't even recognize. We just think it's being a normal person. So if we've got love and compassion and goodness mixed into it, it's okay. But it's actually this motor, and the more raw that attachment is, the more nightmarish we are, the more control freaks we are, the more evil we are, the more harm we do to others if we can't access any virtue to mix into our attachment. But the attachment's motor running the show. Can you understand that? It's this massive motor, never stopping, always thinking of something, always anticipating something, always looking forward to something. So now you think when you're dying, there's this primordial fear of knowing, it's like this deep instinct, because we've died in countless lives and the fear's there. Animals have it too. We know it's going to, so then of course you're going to grasp extra strongly. And what do you grasp at? Whatever you are now, your body, yourself. That's what, and this is when the death process starts. This grasping is stupendously more powerful, stupendously more fearful. Clinging frantically to whatever's there. So this is why one of the main things Lama Zopa Rinpoche says in preparing to help people is to create a beautiful, conducive environment for your dying person. The ideal scenario, with respect to hospitals, unless they're very special hospitals, I know you dying people, aren't you? They're dying or they're just sick. Is the hospital lovely and peaceful and no? That's the trouble. You know, really, nurses are so compassionate and kind, but it's about the worst place to die, I'm sorry. You need, like the ideal scenario is rent the best room in the best hotel with the best views of the sky, with full, you know, I'm joking, but I'm not joking. Make the room in the house beautiful. Take out all the clutter, all the crap, all the rubbish, anything, in other words, that will interfere the person's mind. They have to die peacefully. So that means, you see, the Buddha's view about the mind is so interesting, as I've mentioned many times. Whatever any sentient being hears and sees, in particular these two senses, leaves imprints in the mind. It's like as one Lama said, every single second we're taking photos of everything and storing them in our mind. So if attachment is there like a rampant vampire, clinging to something, don't give them the dog, for God's sake. Don't give them their pussycat. Don't give them their beloved husband, their children all crying around them. They're going to cling like vampires. They're going to hang on for weeks, clinging frantically at something. But if the room is free and only images of the Buddha, let's say, if they're Buddhists, only images of your guru, only sounds of the Dharma, everything is peaceful, the carers whom you adore, who you know what practices, it's like a blissful feeling, when they're looking in the window outside is a clear sky and lovely flowers. Everything is perfectly done like a movie set. That's how to die. So whatever's there, and this is the point that Lama Zopa makes, given that the grasping is there, that grasping will grasp onto the guru, and that's perfect. Then you grasp onto the next life. Perfect. That's how to die. Because I think grasping and attachment is so stupendous. We don't get this in the West at all. We think it's called affection. That's why we have the dogs and the cats and the aunties and the uncles and moaning and crying and grasping. And there's love and peace and panic attack. It's like the most nightmarish way. You couldn't die worse than that. Or having loud hospitals with banging and clashing and other people moaning and crying and machines and noise and doors. It's like a nightmare. And as they say, when you die, the mind gets unbelievably sensitive. Even the tiniest noise can be distressing. It's like it's the most precious time, most important time. I remember one woman who came to a course, we were discussing this, and she was on a roster helping all the friends help a friend die. So, she said, she came back the next day and said, well, our friend died last night. But what happened is I walked into the room, I moved out the pets, I turned off the Patsy Cline music, I took out all the troublemakers, I made the room clean and nice, and then the woman had nothing else to cling on to, so she died peacefully. So when it's all the family, as long as they're there, you're going to hold on. Of course you'll hold on like a vampire, and you can hold on for weeks sometimes. It can be. And so then as soon as they're not there, there's nothing to cling to any longer. I'd say it's more like that. Because it's just exhausting to hold on. That's attachment. I remember when Frank Sinatra died, something like his wife, it was like a nightmare. Screaming at him. Hold on, Frank! Hold on! Hold on, Frank! Hold on! Can you imagine the torture? But he's clung like a vampire all his life, and now he finally can't. I mean, the poor man. What a nightmare, The grasping is what I really learned when I studied the 12 links. This is another aspect of this book. The two last bits to put in the book that I just knew it wasn't quite finished. One was the Amitabha's Pure Land, and I'm going to talk about it and read Rinpoche's words. And the other one was this business of the 12 links, how this grasping at the time of death is very powerful. I'd never studied the 12 links. I've never had a teaching on the 12 links. So it took me months just to read and study, and all the lamas have different views, I went to one geshe and said, this geshe says that, and this he says, well, he's wrong. They're all got different views, right? So it took a long time to study it. But Rinpoche's particular point is at the time of death. These several links play a very crucial role in the process of dying. So it was so helpful to understand this. And that's what his point is about, this craving and grasping. They kick in like at the time before you stop breathing. And that is what triggers the karmic seeds. That grasping is what triggers the karmic seeds. So you've got to be ready. You've got to be prepared. It's got to be conducive. And that's where the precious role of a beloved person, you know yourselves, even when the slightest thing goes wrong, when you're slightly sick or miserable, the first thing we do is think of someone to turn to, don't we? And if you've got nobody to turn to, like all these poor people in hospitals and old people's homes treated like veggies and whatever, not being rude, can you imagine the nightmare? Their minds aren't prepared. They've never controlled their minds in their whole lives because no one's taught them. They've followed every delusion they've ever had because no one's taught them not to. And now finally, alone and demented. What you couldn't wish for the worst way to die than that. You know. So that's why to even be the friendly cleaner in the hospital who looks at you lovingly and makes you feel loved and peaceful. This is like the most miraculous gift you can give somebody, you know, to help the mind be peaceful and virtuous. Unbelievable. So attachment at the time of death, the worst. And that's why Rinpoche says, this became clear to me in this book, that the grasping, as he says, for us in our past life, before we stop breathing, not only would we have had very powerful morality karma in our petrol tank ready to be triggered, which is the cause of getting a human body, which is the cause of our mind running like a magnet to our present mother's human womb, specifically, morality caused that. Not only did we have powerful generosity karma, which is how come we're living in a place like Adelaide as opposed to whether you have to work 18 hours for a grain of rice with no money and nothing. That's the result of generosity, like a miracle. So you can have an appropriate life so you can practice. Not only did we have that, we must have had very strong grasping, the delusion, the grasping for a human birth. Now, and this is me extrapolating now. But you can think of that ant or the mouse, certainly the mouse or the cat or the dog or the baby or your auntie or your senile grandma. There you are, this presence in their life, next, soothing them, calming them. The mouse as well, calming their fears by being a soothing presence. And most perfectly, because of the sensory experiences are so powerful and leave imprints in the mind, letting them hear the Buddha's teachings, hear the mantras. I remember one old lady in one old people's home, out of her brain, paranoid, deluded, we didn't know what to do, so I sat and I sang mantras. She instantaneously calmed down, right there. You have to be a genius to help people. But the mantras are so powerful because that invokes the Buddha, and the Buddhas can pick them up and help them get a decent life, you know. Seeing it, but the sound especially, when you're old, you can't see anything, but the sound is such a powerful one. So day and night for your animals, you know, you should have the CDs on of the teachings. We go to work, think we love our little cat and give them livers and probably have insurance for them, but you leave them in their idiocy for 8 hours when you go to work. Just turn on the tape, please. And all those 8 hours imprints of the Dharma in their ear, they'll have a blissful death. You program them for the future lives, you know. It's an unbelievable way to help people. And your senile grandma, and your baby, and the ants, and the rats, and the animals outside. Unbelievable. We get this. It's such an easy way to help. So grasping. We must have had grasping. So if you're there with your cat, your dog, who loves you, who's totally attached to you, your pussy, your doggy, and they see you, they feel safe in your presence, their mind will calm down. They're seeing you, it's like giving them, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if that triggers the imprint to get a human birth, whilst also they're hearing the Dharma, instead of going to the vet and having them kill them, you know. Poor vets these days, they spend most of their lives killing instead of healing. It's terrible. Are we communicating?
Yes.
Any more questions? Yes, yes, and yes. Come on. Where's the mic? Absolutely. Go on. Yes.
Excuse me, Venerable Robina, but what about helping somebody who has been on serious drugs or alcohol, you know, is very seriously ill with that at the time of death? And what about helping, well, in my example, my mother, who is very old, and she's had an enormous amount of resentment that she's carried through this lifetime.
Yes.
But she also has a lot of positive things
Yes,
about
exactly.
her. So, and she's not a Buddhist. So
No, I understand. Okay, well, the second part first. Yeah. So then, does your mummy love you?
Oh, yes.
Okay, then darling, one of the things, remember in the book, and the way, particularly the way I've done the book, which you can download as a PDF, I've numbered all the practices so you can find them very easily. There's like 87 different practices Rinpoche recommends, and many of these, like there's one section, what to talk about. So that, given that your job is to help your mother trigger her virtue, trigger her happy mind, trigger her rejoicing, then darling, you just flood her with loving words. What a wonderful mother you've been. What a good mother you are. You're wonderful. I love you, mother. You tell her we never tell ourselves good thoughts. We only tell ourselves bad thoughts. So to hear one piece of praise is like nectar on her heart. Just fill her with love. Be like a rock, be steady, be kind, be loving, make her feel totally secure, and praise her and love her and tell her about her good qualities. And she'll argue with you, no, Mummy, you've been a wonderful mother. I love you. She's got to hear this until her little heart opens, you know. This is so precious for her. And then secondly, she's not a Buddhist. This doesn't mean you can't be a bit sneaky. You know, you can have there's all these days, so many people have made music behind all the mantras. You can just have a quiet in the background. Quiet, so quiet, but subtly going into her mind, you know. The mantras with music. Does she like the sound of quiet music? Because it's so powerful for the mind. The sound one is such a powerful sense. And then when she gets older and she's in her dreams even, sound is unbelievably powerful. Because like, I remember one example. A friend of mine was in a deep coma in hospital. They said she was going to die, whatever reason, doesn't matter, she's in Sydney. And I remember going to the hospital, like the husband rang up the hospital and said, but can I come in? I'm her pastor, and I was a Buddhist nun. Well, first it was the ICU at night. They call it ICU here? Mm-hmm. ICU here. So anyway, I got there at midnight because it was easier to drive at night time. Because I could drive fast at night, you see, so whatever. It was a long drive from the centre, and it was in Sydney, Mona Vale Hospital. And I remember I'd go in there at midnight, and there she was all wired up, and they didn't think she didn't come out of it or anything, right? And then she'd known many of the lamas, that she had them stay at her house, Sakya Chins and Dongsa Khyentse Rinpoche. But she wasn't really a Buddhist, but there she was. And so the husband, so when he said I was a Buddhist nun, and when I came, they were a bit nervous. They said, oh, please don't ring any bells, you know. So I promised I wouldn't ring any bells. Anyway, I just stayed with her for like an hour, half an hour, and just said prayers. So then every now and again, and I'd go right close to her ear, and I'd whisper loudly, and occasionally I'd say, Judy, His Holiness Sakya Trinzen's praying for you. Judy, Sakya Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche is praying for you. Anyway, whatever. The point is she came out of a coma weeks later, I don't remember. And I went to see her, and she said the only thing she remembered was, she said it was this husky voice. I said, no, it was mine, she said. So it was a blue lady coming through the window, whatever, saying, Judy, Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche is praying for you. Judy, His Holiness Sakya Trinzen's praying for you. She remembered it, heard exactly the only thing. I remember Jeffrey Hopkins had Lyme's disease. At some point, I interviewed him in 95 for Mandela, and he went to the deepest of coma. They didn't expect him out of it. The only thing he could remember, he said, was the wisdom mantra, Omar Abba Sanadi. He said, Ling Rinpoche told him never to forget this mantra. The only thing he could find in his mind, Omar Abba Sanadi. So the fact is, even when a person's unconscious, when they're in a coma, and this is something very fascinating, which just touches on your, maybe on your right, on the first part of your question as well. In the West, you give them a drug, they're peaceful, because the body looks peaceful. Now, have you ever had when you've had dreams, and you've had nightmares? I bet someone seeing you would say, oh, isn't she sleeping so peacefully? But you know you're having a hell on earth experience, isn't it? And your body mightn't necessarily be, tossing about. Because that's your subtle consciousness. This is the death process we're going to go into later. We've got gross consciousness, which is the sensory and the conceptual. Then when you stop breathing, you now go to your subtle. Or when you go to sleep, it's the same. It's the same process we're going to go through. So your subtle consciousness, your dreams. Well, dreams could be a nightmare. People in comas, they come back and report their experiences. I mean, some guy, he reported these like hell-like experiences for like eons. That was while he was in a coma, looking peaceful. So it's a joke to think, because you've drugged them out, that they're peaceful. It's like ridiculous to say that. That's the Buddhist understanding, So one of the things is, as much as you can, forget about whether alcoholic and getting off drugs, I don't know that one, but too many drugs. You've got to have a fine balance between being conscious and trying to also, medicate the pain. Because the fact is, you cannot medicate mental anguish. You can only medicate physical pain. And when you know that, it's a very different approach, And then that's why, too, when they're in a coma, the room should be like only peaceful things should happen in that room. Only the sound of Dharma. Nobody chatting. No one, only quiet otherwise. Just because you're in a coma doesn't mean they can't be conscious. Did you read about years ago that Italian mother whose son was plugged in for 25 years? She wouldn't let them pull the plug. He came back out of his coma and he said he was conscious the whole time. Conscious. I remember having this is my own experience. One time during a retreat in Dharamsala, when I first became nun, did Vajrasattva retreat, 3 months in Tushita. And for a period, a couple of weeks maybe, I can't remember, we'd all, every time after lunch we'd go to have our nap, you know. But for some period, I had what they call lucid dreams, I think. But I was completely conscious of everything going on around me. All my senses were working, but I was asleep. So I could hear everything. Now that's common, not an uncommon experience. Not an uncommon. So to think because they're in a coma, they're peaceful or don't know what's going on is like a joke, you know. And people can leave their bodies. There's so many things, and this subtle consciousness, and just because it's subtle doesn't mean it's going to be blissful. It can be a nightmare. It can be hideous, depending on what's going on in your life, you know. So, if a person, like, you know, you said, Amanda mentioned about alcoholic, you mean withdrawing from the pain of what? How do you mean?
My sister is and has been an alcoholic, and she's also now has been using ice for 3 years.
Yes.
So
God.
the average lifespan for an ice user is 5 years. So I'm not sure whether I'll have the opportunity to be with her
I
at the
understand,
time
darling.
of death.
Absolutely.
But if I was able to be with her, I'd want to know what to do.
I think the same. What you can do, I mean, God knows if she's, I mean, because if she's going to be dying, is she still able to put the ice into her veins or whatever you do with ice? Or will she not be able to get it?
Smoke it up. No, she wouldn't be able to get it.
Okay, so she'll be pretty tortured.
Yeah.
So then all you can do is try and, I mean, that's the mind that's tortured. But the body, I suppose, I don't know, I mean, do you have patients like that, Gabe?
Only cancer ward.
Oh, cancer ward, okay. Anybody have patients like that? Ex-alcoholics and things? Tell us about it. Give us the mic, please.
Yeah, I believe it's very important to be with them and give them a lot of peace. I see people with...
Can't hear you very well.
sorry.
So what type of drugs do you give someone like that to try and alleviate the pain? Is there much you can do, drug-wise?
Yeah, we can give a lot of drugs, but I don't think it alleviates the pain, as you say.
So
The anguish.
the mental, no, that,
It
not,
doesn't
what about the body
alleviate
though?
the body
It helps the
can
body a
be
bit?
peaceful, yes, and we can always guarantee that, well, mostly always guarantee that people will not die in physical pain. Then it's up to the
mental aspect,
surroundings
yeah,
to make
sure.
it very peaceful as
understand.
possible,
So
whether it's drugs or alcohol.
So if you say they won't die in physical pain, does that mean they're unconscious?
Yes, they could be drugged or unconscious, or sometimes
You can
if
still be
we can get
conscious.
them to a state where they aren't,
Okay.
or they can come out of it
All
for a
right.
while, and then if they're in pain,
Okay.
we can let them have
Yeah.
contact.
So the physical, the
Yeah.
medical side, you've got to sort that out, but I think the mental is the same. What can you do, you know, what can you do? So you can pray that maybe she gets so sick that she just can't take any drugs, and at least it can be a period when she can, you know, be torture for her, when you can just, I mean, again, be skillful, put mantras on. And this is, see, the Buddhist point is, are you Buddhist? I'm saying, okay, because I think that one we have to think about too, because it sounds again like religious and mystical. But when I can think of that experience of my friend Judy, the only thing she remembered, you know, was these words. That's kind of powerful. So having the sound of mantra, even though she dies tortured, having the sound of mantras quietly, even when she's asleep, it's going deep into her mind. It'll leave incredible imprint, and that hooks her, gets the Buddhas to connect, brings the Buddhas, you know. So this is the most precious way to help, more than anything else. Your mother, the mouse, the dog, your sister. That's the most precious thing. Even if they die tormented, if they're hearing the sound, that can be something that can transform, you know. And then, of course, the other point is, and many of the practices in the book about what to do after they died. Even Lama Zopa says, I mean, he's endlessly optimistic. Even if they're in the lower realms, they can do practices that can help them remove from the lower realms. In the bardo, and they're heading towards the lower realms, the practices can do. There's a lot of practice in the book that you can do to help them. So there's always something you can do, you know. Do you understand? And the fact is, though, we can't make it perfect. We can't guarantee, because that's karma, you know, isn't it? But I think the one that really struck me was being like this rock of Gibraltar for this person, loving, like, as I said, we all cling to somebody. We're desperate when we're miserable. I always remember, this is something for me, it really struck me. You know, when you're a little kid, let's say you have a mother, and you're a little kid and something goes wrong. You cry hysterically, right? And you make a beeline for mummy, don't you? And you look her in the eyes and screaming and tears coming up, the whole world is collapsing. And this is the point now. Look what mummy does. Mummy says, oh, darling, it's okay. And she gives you a hug. And guess what? You believe her. That's how you help people. Do you hear what I'm saying? Make them feel fine. Make them feel secure, you know. Do you understand? It's like a miracle. Instead of panicking as well. What did your brother do to you? Oh my God, this is a disaster. Call the lawyers. You don't know. It's all right, darling. Do you understand? Make them feel, be like a rock and make them feel safe. Because if you start panicking as well, then the end of it is a disaster. Like a rock. Optimistic. Always. That's the key. That's the way to help. Then they will just die to see you, even for a few minutes. They'll be so blissful when you walk in the door because they're clinging to you, taking refuge in you. And then you have the mantras as well. That's the best for everybody. The ants, the dogs, the mice, the humans, your grandma, babies, everything. Someone else. Huh?
Oh, hello, I'm Sheridan.
Hello.
Hi. Look, a couple of years ago, I was out on North Stradbroke Island in a place called Mupi Mupi Pa, and I was briefly working there, and the staff were having a bit of a chuckle at me, and they said, "Oh, come with us, come into this room. We haven't shown it to you yet." And when I walked in there, it was nearly as big as this room, but the enormous windows from top to bottom were closed with curtains. So it was a dark room, and I walked into the centre, and suddenly the world started moving, and I gasped, and I fell back against the wall, and they laughed, and I knew they'd set it up. And then the next thing, they opened the curtains and we were looking onto the water and the sailing ships going up to the Whitsundays. And I said, whatever is this place? It was unbelievably beautiful. And they said, oh, this is exactly where we bring because it's an Indigenous place, this is where we bring people to die.
What do you mean you fell against the wall? I don't understand that.
Oh, I literally was just...
But why? I don't understand what you're saying.
Well, I guess I'm basically saying that the energy at that place was just absolutely profoundly, I don't want to say exquisite, but the peace, that Christian, that peace beyond all understanding.
Okay.
And I'm just wondering, whatever that was, and they obviously know these places, whatever that was, well, firstly, I'd love to know what it was, but secondly, how do we bring that experience? Is there a way we can help by bringing that form of experience
Well,
to
I don't know
people?
what that, I can hear you, but I can't really understand how to answer that. And in a sense, it's all I'm doing here. Using the Buddhas as I don't know about what they talk about, who the beings they are that they talk about, I don't know. But then bringing the presence of the holy beings here, that's what I'm saying about mantras and things. That's what I'm describing. That's the Buddhist approach. By invoking them to come and be there, by saying their names and having the prayers, and that's what I'm discussing. Exactly that. Do you understand?
Yeah, I really get you.
Yeah, yeah.
That really helps.
Yeah. Yes.
I was just wondering whether the fear that somebody may feel when they die, that's related to grasping, to losing themselves.
That's right. That is that. Mainly that, yes.
Is that different than the fear somebody might experience with the method of their death?
What do you mean, darling? Method of their death.
Thinking about some of the people that you may have known that have been electrocuted, or somebody who's died a violent death.
Yes.
If somebody dies with that kind of fear, but their mind was peaceful before that, with less grasping in their lives, does that make a difference?
It could, of course it does. Of course it does. It's like, you know yourselves, you could be driving the car beautifully for 30 years and you're really good and never have an accident, and one day you can have an accident. So you can't guarantee because you've driven the car for 30 years perfectly that something's not bad's going to happen. Until in other words, talking spiritually, until we're highly realised, which means realised emptiness and have gone beyond fear, there's so many karmic seeds there, we have no idea what's going to happen, It's very difficult. It could easily be that you've lived a good life, but a certain karma ripens and you die a terrible death and fear ripens. Of course it can. There's no guarantee.
So it's still the fear that will determine what karma ripens.
We've got trillions of seeds in our mind. If you think that every single thing we think and do and say doesn't go astray, it all goes into our bank vaults, my analogy. So all the virtuous seeds, and there's one particular bank vault of karmic seeds that will be the ones that produce a type of life, the fully ripened result, they call it. That's the one that's triggered. So, in general, what they say is, when the mind is grasping and frantic and fear and full of attachment, the karmic seed that is most habitual, that is the strongest habit that has been nourished, let's say in your life, let's say a person in their life has never thought about anything, never looked at their mind, just followed their instincts and killed the rats and killed the roaches and cheated on their wife and get angry when they feel like it. They've never been conscious. They're a regular person, but never looked at their mind, never thought about impermanence. And then they die a terrible death. then it's no-brainer. They die a so-called quiet death. It's a no-brainer that the negative seeds have been really nourished, haven't they? So they're going to easily be the ones that will be triggered at the time of death. Of course they will. It's natural because they've never thought. They're not ready. They're not prepared. Whereas another person, you can spend your life being virtuous. You can fairly much, if you want to guarantee anything, the karma is reasonable. If you spend a life growing, if you spend a life nourishing your garden every day, pulling out the weeds, every day growing the herbs and the flowers, you can pretty much deduce that that's going to bring the result. It's not as if karma is some kind of unnatural law that suddenly, a monstrous weed that you never saw will ripen overnight and suffocate everything. It's just superstitious. So if you are living a peaceful life, then it's logical that it's likely that you'll die well. It's logical, But again, karma's very subtle.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yes, I do. But even if someone like that, I'm thinking about that priest actually. The priest in France who died recently.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, I mean, I don't know this man.
That's right.
How
was he killed?
He had his throat cut by a terrorist.
I see. And there was a long period before he got his throat cut. Was there talking and stuff?
No.
Just all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Out of the blue?
They came into the church and...
And he was doing mass or something?
Yes, yes.
Well, maybe he had close to God and virtue was in his heart, wouldn't it be? If he was sitting there being drunk or something, it might have been a problem.
Yeah.
Do you understand my point?
Yes.
He could have been at home having a glass of sherry, being mad about the next door neighbour.
Yeah.
But there maybe he's doing his job and
Yeah.
he's close to God, his heart's virtuous. What a good way to die.
So that makes a difference.
Yeah, it makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Do you understand? Yes.
Robina, could you say a little bit more about Amitabha's Pure Land?
I will do that, yes, I will
can
do
I
that.
just, is that, if you say that, because I was thinking that about to aspire to be reborn a human, that
Yes.
it would be of more benefit.
That's right, exactly.
Be.
Let me talk about, okay. So this means we've got to step back a bit here and talk about what a Pure Land is, okay? And again, this might be abstract depending on how much we've taught, how much we've heard in the teachings. Oh, it's not here. I didn't put it in. Okay, never mind. So the word Buddha is actually referring to all-knowing, all-compassionate, fully developed, omniscient, enlightened consciousness. So when you've accomplished that, you don't need bodies. Bodies are the fruit of negative karma. They're like a joke, You don't need a body by then. That's actual Buddha. Pervades the universe, knows everything. It's a bit like, as Lama's said, a bit like the Christian idea of God. The difference is everyone can become one. So then, that's Buddha. Now, out of infinite compassion over countless lives of perfecting that Buddhahood, that person, because of compassion, is only existing to benefit others. Just spontaneous. So then naturally, for peanuts like you and me, who can't access pure unmanifest consciousness, they will manifest in bodies to help us. That's their job. Even the lowest level bodies suffer. Many stages before they get to Buddhahood can manifest their mind in 100 forms simultaneously to help sentient beings. It's their job, So, there's two main types of forms, really, that you say that bodies the Buddha manifests in. One is a regular kind of body that you and I can see, like Shakyamuni Buddha, the human being, 2,500 years ago. That human, manifesting to benefit sentient beings. So the first point here is this. When we look at the statues, we go, oh yeah, there's Buddha, like as if we're so clever we can recognise. But back then, the place was crawling in sadhus, There was millions of sadhus. It was how it was in India. And he would have been just like one of the sadhus. Well, you couldn't tell a Buddha from a bar of soap. Because he's a human. A Buddha doesn't need a body. So the first form is so, and then the point about that is their speech is their main gift. The power of speech they talk about. This is what, because we're human and we have concepts. So the way the Buddhas can help us is by giving us the words. You could look at Buddha for 47 years and be very nice, but if he doesn't open his mouth, useless. So the speech of the Buddha, the power of speech they talk about, that's the way Buddha manifests to benefit sentient beings like you and me. Now there's a subtler form in which the Buddha manifests to help the Arya Bodhisattvas, those who realised emptiness, who are highly evolved on their path, and this is the form that's depicted by all these pictures, you could say, in Tantra especially, the Bodhisattva aspect of a subtle light body. Well, certainly in Tantra, these forms. And these are all depicting subtle light bodies that regular Joes like you and me cannot cognize. Okay. So all sentient beings, all the realms of existence, Buddha posits all these different realms of existence, as we maybe have learned, you know. And the more we understand how the physical world is made of the 4 elements, and the more we understand the Vajrayana point, that all consciousnesses, all minds are inextricably linked with their own set of the 4 elements. It's a whole elaborate model, and we're going to go to the death process and we'll describe that. But it's just the way it is, Buddhism says. This view just says it's how the universe is. So then when we create karma, what we do is we think things and then we do things with our body and speech. Well, that karma creates us to have a certain kind of form, and then in turn we all occupy an environment. Ants have bodies and an environment. Dogs, monkeys, lions, humans. We have a body, we have a mind, we have connection with other sentient beings who are embodied, and we live in environments together. This is the fruit of karma, our own actions. Well, the Buddhas manifest also in these subtle light bodies with a subtle environment made of light, blissful, radiant, that is only can be cognized when you're qualified. So in general, all the trillions of Buddhas, and there's many, 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 many Buddhas manifesting to benefit sentient beings in different ways, because it's just all the psychological states that they're representing. They've all got to have their own little, what they call Pure Land, their environment. So, in general, you need to be, okay, now I'll read Lama's Open now, from the book, okay? In order to achieve enlightenment quickly for sentient beings, not for yourself, for sentient beings, we need to make sure we go to a Pure Land after we die. So Guru Rinpoche Padmasambhava mentions this, and in many of his teachings, Lama Tsongkhapa says we should pray to be born especially in Amitabha's Pure Land. So, okay, so if you've got Buddha mind, the Dharmakaya they call it, then you've got underneath it 2. Shakyamuni Buddha is a sutra manifestation of Buddha. Then you have Vajradhara, we mentioned last week, manifestation in Tantra. Then under him you've got the 5 Buddha families, and under them you have all the millions of Buddhas. They all belong in different states. They're all related to different states of mind. So Amitabha is one of those 5, and his particular manifestation of particular virtues, okay, states of mind. Amitabha's Pure Land, the blissful realm, Dewa Chen in Tibetan or Sukhavati in Sanskrit, because it is easy for us ordinary people, those with delusions, to be born there. I was surprised by that, Rinpoche said. In his text, The Benefits of the Blissful Realm, which is in the book, Lama Tsongkhapa says, when reciting prayers to be reborn in the Pure Lands of the Buddhas, one should mainly focus on being reborn in Sukhavati. In fact, one of the 8 prayers to benefit the dead that are traditionally recited in the Gelug Tibetan monasteries is Lama Tsongkhapa's prayer to be reborn in the blissful realm of Amitabha Buddha. These are all in the book. And that's the one I recite to myself at the end of the night, or have it with my earphones on. And it's said that if you recite daily another of the 8, the king of prayers, you'll definitely be born there. Okay, so there are numberless Pure Lands. As many there are Buddhas, manifestations of different qualities, there are that many Pure Lands, because these Buddhas are manifesting in subtle light bodies with a subtle light environment. See, this is where we have to, the more we understand emptiness, the more we understand that nothing has an inherent nature, and the more we understand karma, and the more we understand that we create our environment. We don't think so. We think it's all out there from its own side, and someone kind of made me and plopped me in the middle of it. No, it's the karmic result of your past virtue and non-virtue, nothing else. However things appear to us is the fruit of our past actions, the fruit of our past karma. It's a pretty intense concept, you know. It takes a while to get our head around it. This is Buddha's view. We are creators of our own reality, our own body, our own mind, our own tendencies, our own experiences, and our own environment, how it manifests, you know. That's what Buddha says. Pure Land's the same. There are numberless Pure Lands where you can practice Tantra and achieve enlightenment. There are Vajrayoginis and Haruka's Pure Lands where you can definitely become enlightened, and Tushita, Maitreya Buddha's Pure Land. And of course you can pray to be born in Shambhala, which is a place related to Kala Chakra. However, to be born in many of the Pure Lands is very difficult. For some you need to have achieved the 8th level of the Mahayana path. To be reborn in the lowest Pure Lands, you need to have cut the ego, the ignorance holding the I as truly existent. You need to have actualized the happiness, the bliss of the ultimate reality of no self. And to be born in Tushita, you need to have very pure morality. So it's very difficult. If you don't have these realizations, if you still have delusions, even if you pray, and pray just means aspire, want. We don't say, oh, I pray to go to France. Pray, may I go to France. We might have said that in the medieval days. It just means aspire. Oh, may I go to France? And then you do the job of getting there. Same here. Even if you pray to go to these Pure Lands, even if you aspire, even if you want, you won't succeed. So many of the Pure Lands, in other words, are not where ordinary beings can be reborn. So as I mentioned, ordinary beings, those who have delusions and for whom it is difficult to be born in most Pure Lands, can easily take birth in Amitabha's Pure Land. And not only that, according to my root guru, Trijang Rinpoche, you can practice Tantra and become enlightened in the blissful realm. It's also said that you can get enlightened more quickly there than in other Pure Lands. And once you're there, whatever you wish will be achieved. And from there you can go to any other Pure Land. So it's much more special than other Pure Lands. So the point is, the only reason you go there is to get some realizations. Then you can come back and do what you like. So I just think that's a no-brainer. I'm sick of making a trouble and making a mess. I want to get some realizations, please, that I can come back and really have fun as well as help people. That's the reason, the only reason to go. Do you see? And I think the way time is, I mean, it's very hard, this concept of time. They say, you know, it can be a very short time because you can get realizations very quickly because your mind is pure. You're a sort of subtle light body. You can just imbue yourself with all the Buddhist teachings pretty quickly. Then you can bop around and have human bodies as many as you like. Do you see my point? That's the reason. So you got to aspire, whichever one, you know. Aim. Karma takes care, loving she says. Are we communicating here, people?
Yes.
Okay. So now, anyway, I told you now I'm a fan. I used to be so rude. I told these Chinese people in their Amitabha Buddhist land, I was so arrogant, you know. Now I'm a real fan, I promise. So as I said, it's on my itinerary.
Robina, how does it look?
Oh, there's long descriptions in here. It's long text. Rinpoche had one of his monks in Sarah J. translated. It just sounds like science fiction because we're just used to seeing apples and pears and shit and pee-pee and caca and the rest, isn't it? Not used to things and subtle. It's just everything's radiant and blissful and it's the manifestation of our pure mind.
And how do we manifest there? Like, how do we...
Light, subtle light
arrive?
light bodies. Yes, everything's Dharma. Just here, pure, yeah.
No, I mean, like when we're reborn there.
Yes.
So we...
Just manifest.
I've heard that you manifest inside a lotus.
I know, I don't know, there's none of that's in here. I've heard all about that stuff. I don't know about that stuff. I don't know about that stuff. It's not in here.
But
I don't
with
know.
light bodies.
Huh?
Light bodies.
Yeah, light bodies.
You exist as...
No dramas, no delusions. Yeah.
Sounds
See,
great.
I know, exactly. See, the thing is, this is where it all just again can sound like science fiction, but still I'll say it. Before, you see, if time, we've got to ask the question, if minds are beginningless, then we all know very well this planet started at some point, didn't it? We know that. So we've got to think, well, where were we before the planet, you know? Isn't it? So human, you see, the thing is about these realms, Buddhist teachings about realms of existence. They're just states of mind, that's all, coming along with a certain level of physicality and a certain environmental. So then in samsara, quote unquote, you've got these kind of, I call them different suburbs. So there's the top suburbs in samsara. They're called God realms. And that's equivalent to heaven or paradise, the way they describe it, which is similar to having subtle light bodies. But there's no virtue, there's no dharma there. It's just bliss, utter joy, utter bliss, which is the fruit of virtue, of being a good person. It manifests as bliss. And it lasts a long time, but you're so blissed out, and you don't realise you haven't realised emptiness yet. You don't realise you haven't cut the ego yet. And eventually that runs out, the karma runs out, and you still got back to suffering again. Then you've got the human realm. Now this is, as we know, humans, this few thousand million years or whatever we call humans, we've got this body, isn't it? Bag of bones. Doesn't sound like a light body, does it? It's horrible. We can see, comparing. But nevertheless, they say a human birth is a better one to have because at least you've got enough suffering to remember. I mean, you could say that. We've got access to our intelligence and to our virtue, and we know we can do some changing because we can see that life isn't so hunky-dory after all. But the point is this. Before this planet, there's always human state. So the real meaning of human for Buddha is referring to the virtues. Now, the next realm down in samsara is the animals. And Buddha's model of the mind refers to all beings, not just humans. So there's ego grasping. And then on the basis of ego grasping, we have attachment to get what that I wants. On the basis of attachment, not getting what it wants, we get angry or whatever. Then the jealousy and all the dramas. Well, look at the monkeys. Look at the dogs. Can you not see exactly the same? Jealousy, attachment, anger, resentment, hurting each other, aggression. I mean, excuse me, join the universe here. But the difference between human and animals, and this is not being rude, is we can access our virtues if we're lucky. So human qualities are the virtues. The animal qualities are the ones we've already got too. So basically, eons before this planet, They talk about human birth. The human realm was like a Pure Land. Subtle light body. Our physical energy was subtle light. We've got these 4 elements, and depending on the karma we create. As Lama Zopa says in the Kala Chakra Tantra, it says, like I mentioned, there are these detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship between the internal and external energies. Internal is mind, external is the 4 elements. And our minds are conjoined with their own set of the 4 elements. And the Tibetan medical system is really deeply into this model. Your Tibetan doctor will feel your pulses, and she can feel the imbalance of certain wind energies, and then she knows that's related to your attachment, or your anger, or your whatever it is. So by adjusting the wind energies, you can adjust your mind. It's a very subtle model, you know. So the interplay between the physical elements and the mind is inextricable. So as Rinpoche says, when the mind is negative, that pollutes the wind energies, which in turn karmically produces ill health. And in turn, karmically, over a longer period, and collective karma, that produces the external unbalanced environment. So all the universe is based upon the actions of sentient beings, starting with the thoughts. So, an animal realm is where you've got this gross body. Look at the dogs, the monkeys, the lions, you know, where they can only access their non-virtue. The lion can't access her kindness. She's got imprints of countless lives of virtue. She's got countless lives like I have, like you have. And everything she's done that's been good in the past and hasn't finished is still in her bank vaults, but she can't access them because the delusions are so rampant. She can only follow her lion nature. And when she sees the buffaloes, she has no choice but to stalk it and get it and rip its guts out and bring her babies and eat the hot entrails while it's screaming in agony and never see any suffering because the delusions are so rampant. Well, look at us humans. We're a sorry lot, you know. But we at least can access our virtue. The lion can't. So in a sense, before this planet, human birth, which is just a state of mind, was much higher before this planet. And our physical energy was subtle light. So therefore we can only access virtue. It lasted a long time. We can get enlightened very easily. But gradually over time we became degenerate, and all the delusions like attachment, which were latent there, began to manifest. That pollutes the wind energies, which slowly means karmically, like karmic evolution. We've then now born on a planet in this human body looking like a bunch of apes. I mean, it's kind of a sorry type of rebirth. Are we communicating here? I mean, of course it's like science fiction. It's not how the West thinks. It's Buddha's view, you know. So the human qualities are the virtues. That's it. And if we can access a few of those, how fortunate. Intelligence, the ability to see something from another point of view. Intelligence and virtue, they are the unique characteristics of human. But unfortunately, human realm is so degenerate now. I mean, you know, look at humans. Most humans make just a terrible mess. So much suffering, so much suffering, so much suffering. And then further down the spectrum, you've got the 3 lower realms, as they call it, are the manifestations of the 3 main delusions. Animals are the predominance of incredible ego grasping, ignorance, which causes them to only be able to manifest their incredible attachment, their anger, their fears, their jealousy. They can't access their virtues. Some animals have some karma, like dogs. Domestic dogs have some karma to be around humans, you know, and have some be kind and do good things. But just karmic imprints. No choice about it. Lama Zopa said one time, this is shocking to our ears, if just for a few moments we could have the direct experience of the mind of our cute little dog, their suffering, their mental suffering, will be so nightmarish that we would never stand to waste another single second of this precious human life. The suffering would be unbearable. The thought of having that type of rebirth would be unbearable. We'd never waste this human life again. Now that's insane to us. We don't see suffering when we see dogs. We don't see suffering unless they're getting harmed. We don't see their minds, not even in the slightest. So it's a very different view. So further down the spectrum, you have the spirits who are disembodied. And if it's true that all minds are conjoined with their own set of the 4 elements, well, it's pretty evident the mind is conjoined. Look at this bag of bones. Look at the elephant. Look at the dog. Look at the ant even. But spirits, you could argue that their minds are conjoined with air energy. They flick from pillar to post, you know, like nightmare is suffering. Infinite more than animals. Predominant, intense grasping. And then even further down the spectrum, the hell beings, they're called hell beings. You could argue their minds are conjoined with fire element. And they're all experiencing the fruits of their past actions, all experiencing the karmic visions of their past actions. Everything is made up by each individual being. we are the creators of our own suffering and we are the creators of our own happiness, Buddha says. Okay. Time for lunch, I think. Any more questions before lunch? Yes,
Well, I'd
darling,
just like to
yes,
say,
please.
Yesterday I was driving, I had stopped at a traffic light and
Where's
I
the
looked up
microphone?
Flinders Park. I was stopped at this traffic light yesterday and I was looked up and outside of the Flinders Park Primary School there's a huge big notice to say, life does not come with a remote, get up and change it yourself.
Oh, very cute. Very nice, I like that. Okay, so then I think after lunch, and then again also tomorrow, I'll start to go into go through the stages which Ed talks about in the book, what to do the weeks and months before, the kind of practices he recommends, the things to do, depending on the person, this type of thing, you know. And then we'll go through the death process and as much as we can. Okay? So I think you have your lunch and have fun, whatever you do. But I'd really like you to use at least 30 minutes for discussion, if you can, please. If you can. Whatever. Do your best. We'll go for 90 minutes, I'd say. Yeah? All right, darling. Thank you.